Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the Doug.Show. I'm Doug Cunnington, and in this episode, we talk to Jake Thomas again, but we're not talking about his niche site at all. We're going to talk about YouTube. And I mentioned in our last interview, Jake is a bit of a YouTube nerd. There's a reason for it. You know, he was doing some analysis for work, but he's been spending a lot of time on creator hooks where he shares sort of ideas and some strategies on the YouTube side. Today, we're going to cover two different sort of analyses that he's done. One looking at YouTube search results and another at YouTube titles. And hopefully, we'll get some great ideas around kind of creating YouTube videos and making them useful for people and, getting more views. I think that's the goal. So, Jake, how's it going today?
It's going excellent, Doug. How are you doing?
Doing really good, and I'm a big YouTube nerd as well. I really enjoy the format and the community and all that stuff, and it's kind of cool when it comes together. You know, you and I are into SEO, and we have this knowledge about keyword research, and a lot of creators maybe on YouTube don't use that sort of search idea, and they're just maybe treating it more like a social media platform or something. But anyway, let's hear a little bit about the analysis. At least can you intro the two case studies? And then I want to ask you a little bit about yourself and why you actually know about YouTube. So what did you actually look at in these case studies?
Yeah, so YouTube SEO is very interesting. I was at Vid Summit a couple weeks ago, and I was talking to this guy, and he was like brilliant. He was one of like the smarter like YouTube consultants there, and but he's a behind the scenes guy, and he was like, you can always tell, it's a red flag when someone starts talking about YouTube SEO, and I was like, well, that's interesting. And he just comes from a totally different world. He comes from like the entertainment world, and YouTube. I don't know like what the ratio is, but between like 70 and 80% of views on YouTube are from like browse and suggested. So that's where kind of, the main kind of magic is, like no one's searching for Mr. Beast videos. He's not ranking in search, but he gets, I don't know, hundreds of millions of views or whatever it is a month. So, so there's a world where, some people love YouTube SEO, some people hate it. But if you sell a product or if you're doing reviews that people are searching for, then there's definitely a lot of value there. So one kind of like mini study I did, and it's not like a super official study, but I put a lot of time into it, and I learned a lot, and I thought it was really cool. But I put 1,000 search results into a database, and then I just kind of nerded out on them and tried to see patterns and like see what kept popping up. And we can dive into that now if you want. I also have another mini study that we could talk about. So how do you want to do this here?
Yeah, so introduce the other study, and then I'm going to ask you about your background, which will tell us why we should even listen to you.
Cool. Yeah, so the other study is I did 103 YouTube title A/B tests. So to kind of, the thought behind that, well, there's a two-prong thoughts behind that. So one, I never want to be, so I'm like a YouTube title nerd. I'm talking about YouTube titles all the time, but I never want to be one of those guys who like is just talking about stuff like with no way to like back it up, So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do 100 A/B tests, and I'm going to test, my strategies and theories against, kind of the control. And that's all going to be public. So I'm going to share people, what those are, what the actual results were, the CTR, the click-through rate of title A, the click-through rate of title B. And then we're going to, I'm telling you why I thought, the results were the way they were. So I am super excited about that. And so, yeah, we can talk about that second.
Okay, perfect. So we mentioned it a couple of times. You're really into YouTube sort of titles and kind of the marketing and maybe metrics and analytics side. So what experience do you have with YouTube and with this specific area of metrics?
Yeah, so I was working for a fishing company and I was managing their blog, which is kind of how we were talking about niche sites in a couple of previous episodes, but I was also managing their YouTube channel. And so kind of how it went was we had our content meetings every morning, and I would find different ideas from other niches, and I would say like, all right, cool, this marketing channel, they did 5 copywriting mistakes that beginners make. So I was like, all right, cool. Well, let's do 5 redfish mistakes that beginners make, right? Because we were in the saltwater fishing. So that approach worked really well. I was just doing that internally, and then I started a newsletter. We're doing that externally for everybody else. So I send out like 5 videos every Monday morning saying, "Hey, this worked really well, and for this channel, and here's how you could adapt it for other channels." So what I do is I study like 200 YouTube channels a week. I only look at titles, and I'm only trying to find patterns between those 2 titles, or sorry, between what works. So I've got a database of like almost 500 YouTube titles, and just categorizing them and trying to see what works. And then I have a dog YouTube channel to like test these theories, because like I mentioned earlier, I don't want to be one of those guys who's just preaching, and that has gone well. It was doing about 40,000 views a month, all last year and earlier this year. And then I made some changes, and it was doing about 350,000 at its peak this summer. And then uh, there was some issues with my editor, and so we've fallen off that a little bit.
Okay.
That's I've also been it took me a long time to write these titles for these 100 A/V tests. It was about 30 minutes a title, so it took me about like 50 hours total for the project.
Wow. Interesting. And you're done with all the A/B tests. Is that
Yes,
right?
I'm done.
Cool.
I am done, and they ran for between 2 and 3 weeks, so all of the data is and in about 24 hours from right now, I'm going to launch it. So
Okay.
it will be launched by the time the audience is listening to it. It will be launched.
Very
I'm
good.
just putting like the final touches on compiling. So it's going to be an ebook. It's going to be like $7 ebook. Not that much, but hopefully, uh, you know, hopefully you'll like it. And the
Yeah.
people that I've sent it to already they've been excited, which has made me more excited.
That's awesome. You should charge more, man. I was like, ah, man, is it going to be hundreds of dollars? But anyway, we'll talk about that later. Okay, cool. So you're qualified. You did this professionally for another company. You helped manage their blog. You helped manage the YouTube channel. It went well, right? And then you actually, you work full time on your own stuff now. So you don't work with the fishing company anymore, and you have been studying for a long time all this YouTube stuff. So that's why we're listening to you. Okay, let's jump back and talk about the search results. Again, coming from SEO, like I see it as valuable. I see the other dude's point. I wouldn't necessarily call it a red flag, but there's such a huge number of people on YouTube that even 30% is a shitload of people. So like, why ignore it if your skill set lies there? so,
Hmm.
so let's hear it. What things did you learn in the analysis? And in another case, I'm just going to leave it open because I'm not sure how we should cover this, but I know you have a pretty good idea.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. So the other guy, he was he's coming from gaming. So it's all entertainment. So none of that is search. So I think, like I said earlier, totally different worlds. But so mostly what I was looking at was like, how do you write titles to help rank in search? Um, so the most common like elements that were in, these 1,000 titles. So the most common one was the current year. So, and especially for like products or like how to's that are kind of changing. So, how to train your dog, like you probably wouldn't, you could, but it doesn't make that much sense, to say how to train your dog in 2022, because dogs aren't really changing. But it would make a lot of sense to say how to start a YouTube channel in 2022, because YouTube is always changing, right? So, for technology or things that are changing, like definitely include the current year. And I would think that, so at least on YouTube, if you did how to start a YouTube channel in 2022, and if you did that in, at the beginning of 2022, you could just like, change 2022 for 2023. But it's such a powerful title and it's such a powerful strategy that I would just make a new one. I'd do it for real for 2023. I have heard, people recommend just changing the number in the title, and you could, but I think it's such a powerful strategy to just slap the current year in there. So I would definitely include current year if it makes sense.
Right.
And then also list videos do well for, I mean, even like, best something, like if you like best laptop, if you're looking for like a singular search, then like for most of the time, like YouTube would still send you or would like still surface lists. So I thought that was interesting. It's not exactly what I'm looking for, right? I'm looking for the best one. But YouTube figured, hey, like people probably like lists better. Another element that was most common, and I got three more here. Just so we're talking about titles, is the word beginner, and this makes sense because for many searches, because Doug, you wouldn't say how to start a niche site. Like you probably wouldn't research that because you already know how to. The person who is researching that is probably a beginner. So it actually makes a lot of sense for you to say how to start a niche site for beginners. So that's just one of those, just like psychology and like knowing your audience, knowing like the intent behind the search and knowing who is searching. I think that's huge. And that's for really like anything, is knowing the intent and knowing the person. And I think if you can do those two things, then you will be very successful at no matter like what kind of content or where you're trying to rank or get your content found. I think that was a huge theme that I learned here. And then also authority. So you might say like, how, if we're going back to the dog training thing, how to train your dog, or how a professional dog trainer trains their dogs. Or how to train your dog like a professional dog trainer. That was authority was another thing that kept popping up. And then timeframes. So people are pretty impatient, right? Like we want, if you're searching for something, you want it now. So timeframes was another common thing that I found. So how to potty train your dog in 2 weeks, how to start a YouTube channel in 1 hour. Stuff like that. And they're definitely not mutually exclusive too. So how to start a YouTube channel in 1 hour, maybe parentheses in 2022.
Right.
And that's like, just, match. Yes, exactly. So those were just like kind of the common elements of, how to write titles. And you're really kind of thinking about like how to come up with ideas, that, people want to look for and search, because the best way is, all right, let's say how to start a YouTube channel as a beginner. You would run it like in your intro. You'd be like, hey, if you're starting your first YouTube channel, here's how it is. So you want to have that kind of like, that match with your title and your intro. So that's how to write a good title for ranking and search in YouTube. A couple other like kind of just fun, like quick nerdy stats. 45% of the titles ranking for the best, best laptop, best whatever, 45% of those had the current year. So I thought that was interesting. Only 3.4% of the titles had an emoji. And another thing that I found interesting was most of those titles were like catered to like younger people too. So I think it was like, like best, best songs or something. And it's like kind of like not kids channels, but like channels for teens and stuff. And they had like, best songs in 2022, like 3 fire emojis and stuff like that. So I think again, that was just knowing who your audience is. And then, so this is something that, I used to do almost every single title, but 19% of the titles ended with parentheses.
Okay.
Do you write titles like, kind of like to say your thing and
Yeah.
then end that?
I occasionally I use parentheses. And one thing I need to look at is, you mentioned the character count, and most people watch on their phone. So it depends on the channel, but a lot of people watch on their phone for the stuff, the channels that I have. So, things can get cut off, but putting things in parentheses can be, powerful, and especially like if you kind of lead them down the path of like the next question they may have, or set them up with like some kind of curiosity, which is like I mean, this is the extreme, like the clickbait style, right? Where it's like, you won't believe number 5, or
Yeah.
my jaw dropped when I saw number 7, or something like that. But yeah, like I try to mix a couple things in, but I mean, I see some things that I'm probably going to change up for some upcoming videos for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So that's, just so part of the reason why I got started in this was because at first I was really bad at writing titles and I almost got fired from my job because I was so bad. And so like this whole like creator hooks thing is a little bit of like, let me save the guy who is like, my past self.
Uh-huh.
Because there's no one's like really like talking about how to write better YouTube titles in depth. People will be like, add curiosity and, think about what your audience is searching for, but that's not like really tactical. So anyway, so that's kind of how I got this here. But what I would do is I would kind of find myself just like not in like in a rut, but just like every single one of my titles would be like, how to blank parentheses blank. Like, I would always just follow the same format. So I wanted to find some numbers behind that with 19% ending in parentheses.
Right.
Um,
And
so
I do the exact same or yeah, currently I'm doing the same thing where I found a formula that works pretty good most of the time. So I'm mostly sticking with that. If it makes sense for the video, but I know, again, looking at some of the analysis that you've done and what you publish in creator hooks, like there's a handful of things that I need to mix in. I don't have to like change it every time, but I definitely need to like add some variety. And I think that's the thing. Like if you have variety, then you'll probably, potentially create content that's a little bit different or has a different framing, which is helpful. And then it just gives you like more variety, and novelty is interesting for the audience, which is, what you're trying to do, I think.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And there were two more things that I thought was interesting, from this little mini study. The first one, so I don't have that much data, although I'm working on it, and this is part of me working on it. Uh, I think that statements do better than questions when it comes to writing YouTube titles. Here is some data behind that. For how-to searches, only 2.5% of the titles that were ranking in the top 5 were questions. So for how-to searches, you probably should not write a question. You probably shouldn't use a question in your title. For best, best blank, 4.2% of the titles were questions. So it's up, 2.5 to 4.2. Still not that many. But for X versus Y, so it might be like, stock investing versus real estate investing. 31% of those titles ended in a question. So I don't know if that's just how people are, like everybody's just following the same thing.
Mhm.
But 31% is a lot different than 2.5%. And
Yeah. Interesting.
I,
Quick
I,
follow up here. Sorry to interrupt you, Jake.
no, no.
For like the how to. So, can you give an example of a question versus a statement, and I'll just feed it to you, so it'll give you a second to think. So, how to create a niche site. So, what's the question versus the statement?
Yeah. So, how to create a niche site, you might say, how to create your first niche site question mark or something, versus an authoritative how to create your first niche site. So
Okay.
that might be, or like, or what's the best way to create a niche site? And that's kind of wordy. But yeah, I think that making a bold statement and taking a stance is usually better on YouTube to to make your point, because people also they want, credibility is a big thing that decides whether or not people are going to click. So I think that maybe asking a question isn't a great way to build curiosity. However, if you're doing a comparison video, maybe that is.
And one thing before we move on to the next case study here, maybe, you could have the authoritative title, and then in the thumbnail, you can have a confused person and pose that question in a little bubble or something like that. So like then you kind of get the best of both worlds, where the title is authoritative and you're like displaying the person that might be searching for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to titles and thumbnails, definitely it's like a 1-2 punch. And, there's a couple different ways you can, kind of attack a title and catch somebody's attention. And a big mistake that people often make is repeating the thumbnail or repeating the title in the thumbnail,
right?
And you're wasting an opportunity. So yeah, I mean, it's a 1-2 punch kind of thing.
Perfect. Okay. So yeah, we're definitely running close on time, but I want to hear about the A/B test. So that will be available. So we'll link up for it. But yeah, tell us a little bit about what you learned in the 103 A/B test.
Yeah. So a couple things. So first off, one thing that I've seen work well often is calling out beginners. And I think so. I'm kind of sort of learning how to play the piano, and I recently binge watched a YouTube channel. It was like how to play piano YouTube channel. And later that night, I was laying in bed and I was like, oh, what just happened? And what I did was I watched like all of their videos that had the word beginner in them. And that's because I'm insecure about my piano playing skills. So I'm reading these other videos and, how to read sheet music, how to play the song. And I'm like, there's no way I can play that song. I'm just a beginner. So I was insecure, but I'm hungry to learn. Right. So there's a lot of me. I think, and also, insecure and hungry to learn. And there's beginners are like the biggest subset of any audience, right? So, everybody starts as a beginner, fewer people become intermediate, and then even fewer become experts. So, in the titles that I kind of made them for beginners, I increased the CTR by 23% on average.
Wow.
So an example, Canon EOS M50, more than enough in 2022. So that was the original title. And then the best, title B, my title was the best camera for beginners. Right. So, so I there's kind of a lot that went into that title, but taking out like the exact keyword, but saying, hey, this is the best one for beginners. And that increased the click-through rate by 20%. In that one. And then another one was NFT terms that you need to know. And then my new title was 45 NFT terms beginners need to know. So really like just slapping the word beginner on there increased the CTR by a lot. That specific example, there were only like a couple hundred impressions. So it wasn't like super, I don't want to like put too much stock into it, but I increased the click-through rate by 82%. So I think it was still a win, huge win. And if I think that if there were way more impressions, then it would probably be closer to 20% or so. But I think 82% is a sure W in that regards.
Wow. So throw in beginners. Okay. So
yeah,
everybody look out for a shitload of videos from me with like blah, blah, blah beginners. I'll do new ones. I'm not just going to, throw it at the end of an existing video. Maybe not. I'll do a few. I'm going to do
yeah. I mean, how to start a YouTube channel for beginners in 2022. Boom.
Yeah.
And like as you start to like, if you search something on YouTube, you're probably going to start seeing that all the time. You're like, wow, Jake was right. There's a lot of beginner stuff. There's a lot of 2023 stuff. So that was cool. A couple other things I tried, making things broad. So, sometimes if you want to this was an example from a sports channel. So the title was, how bad was Hashim Thabit? Do you know who Hashim Thabit is?
No.
I didn't think so. No, most people don't. even though this is an NBA channel and his audience is, NBA fans, Hashim Thabit just isn't that well known of a name. It's not like dropping LeBron's name in there. But so my title was, "Is he the biggest bust in NBA history?" So making things a little bit broader, making them, for a broader audience, but also giving them a label. So, taking it to the extreme. So like the biggest bust in NBA history, you know exactly what that is. Like we talked earlier, like the best camera for beginners, as opposed to Canon EOS M50, and Hashim Thabit, we're talking about best camera for beginners or the biggest bust in NBA history. So in this excuse me, in this NBA history one, that increases the click-through rate by 25%.
Got
It
it.
didn't always work though. There were a few different things. There's a lot that kind of goes into that. So, as you're thinking about titles for your channel, same thing with like the Canon EOS M50 thing. Does everybody know what it is? If they do, if you're talking about LeBron, put LeBron's name in it. But if you're talking about Hashim Thabit, or I don't know how popular the Canon EOS M50 is, but really try to think, does everybody know what this is? If yes, then put the name in there. If not, give it a label and try to take it to the extreme. Best camera for beginners, biggest bust in NBA history. And that's like one of the simplest things that you can do if you're talking about products or people, is give them a label, try to take it to the extreme.
Perfect. This has been really educational. I can't wait to pick up the ebook with this further information. So, Jake, it's always amazing to talk to you. We do have a couple other interviews out there that people can check out, so we'll link up to that for sure. Where should people find you?
So on Twitter, you can search Jake Thomas, or you can, or I'm at jthomas__. I did a very poor job on choosing my username there, but yeah, my Twitter SEO game has been stepping up recently. So just search Jake Thomas. You'll see a bearded guy with a golden retriever, and that will be me. Or you can go to creatorhooks.com, and that's the newsletter. You can read past editions if you want on there. But yeah, it's totally free. It goes out every Monday morning, and people seem to like it. So I would suggest to go sign up for it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I'm subscribed there, and yeah, you're blowing up on Twitter over here, and I think the handle's okay. Like the double underscore, we'll link up to it. No one has to remember. We'll link up to all your stuff. But yeah, thanks again, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks, Doug.